thumbs up. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Fleming. As Ashley said, I'm a lead project forester at Colorado State Forest Service. I'm based here in Veta, but I cover all of Huerfano and Los Animas counties, wherever there is trees, particularly with private landowners. The federal government tends to handle all the U.S. Forest Service land. There's plenty of people working for like the state parks and stuff as well. So I help kind of fill in the gaps with the private landowners who don't always have someone who is available to come be their tree expert. So that is kind of why I'm here today. I assume most of you are private landowners or have some sort of interest in at least the private lands of Colorado, maybe your neighbors, or if you're renting. Regardless, this presentation is focused on the right tree for the right place and how to find that. So that will begin. This presentation itself will probably take about 15 or 20 minutes, and then as long as we need to go for questions, I figured that'd probably take the bulk of it. There's always more questions that are going to be asked than I can anticipate, so try to get ahead of them as I could, but yeah, whatever questions you have, there will be plenty of time at the end. So this is kind of the roadmap for where we'll be going today. We're going to be talking about the variables in an urban forest, because that's where we'll mostly be focused, although some of you may have land in the actual like real forest up in the mountains. It's not an urban setting with structures and neighbors and infrastructure. Then we'll talk about personal variables, the things that are going to change from person to person, some other considerations, and then we'll do a recap at the end. This picture, before I go on, is actually your local tree board, or at least the composition of it a few years ago, doing a planting right on the corner of Rice and Maine. So already off to a start where Veta has interest in urban forests, and it's clearly demonstrated. So some of the variables in an urban forest setting, first of all, are going to be the soils. A lot of what we have around here are granite and sandstone derived. Good news in the way that you don't have a lot of fungal problems because it drains so quickly, but bad news that it drains so quickly that our trees don't get a lot of opportunity to capture it. So especially in times of drought, we may be struggling with whatever tree species we do have around. So we're struggling with soil there. The soil quality, because of the parent materials, can also not have as much nutrients in it, not be as just good with I guess capturing those nutrients and keeping them there. And then you have exposure problems too. So the asphalt and sidewalk are obviously going to generate more heat. They're not going to trap the moisture as well, and there's a reason we don't grow plants out of asphalt or sidewalk. And then on the same vein with asphalt, you have a lot of contaminants. The oil from cars, the salt we put on the roads for ice, the other chemicals that we have from construction and things like that, all of that eventually ends up going into the ground, potentially impacting trees and impacting the tree abilities that you have to plant. So keeping that kind of stuff in mind is crucial for determining what the right tree for the right place is. Another thing is elevation. Took the two towns in our area, La Junta and Veta, 3,000 foot difference. Big difference in the types of vegetation that grow in those areas. Part of that is based on the precipitation, not only the type, but the amounts. You go higher in the mountains, Pichara gets a lot more snow than we do here, so it's a different type of precipitation. Then we get a little less, and then the plains are even different from there. So the type, and because of the type, with snow you're going to have a difference in residence time too. Snow hangs out a lot longer. Rain, especially the type of rains we might get in the Veta, can happen real quick, and then by time, it's already starting to evaporate within a few hours. So our ability to capture that can differ very much from elevations. And then there's differences in growing seasons too. The alpine plants are going to not be able to grow as late in the fall or start growing as early in the spring. So that influences the type of trees you can pick from that will be suitable for the place you may be considering. Another consideration would be the aspect, which is generally saying the direction that the sun is in relation to a slope. So that influences the sunlight availability. This picture does a great job of showing that. If this is in the northern hemisphere, this is almost certainly a southern facing slope that's going to get a lot more sun, a lot more evaporation, and not capture that precipitation as long. So that's why you have differences versus a north slope and a south slope. Structures can also do this. Looking out the window to the sidewalk over there, you can see that their sidewalk doesn't get a lot of sun and leads to a lot of issues with potential icing, so that can be a consideration for trees as well. And then other things that block the sunlight would be like the canopy of other trees around. So not only can sunlight be blocked, but then there's also consideration for the shifting of the sunlight. Throughout the year, as we get into winter, the sun drops lower in the sky. So will the tree you're going to select have access to sunlight year-round? Just because it doesn't in the summer, it might not in the winter. So it's an important consideration. Specific location climate is obviously, like I already kind of mentioned, going to be a little different in the mountains versus the plains, and kind of reinforce that changes the precipitation availability and type. So within an urban forest, the resources that people have when considering the type of trees they may want to plant, the bark and tree boards that you have, again, this is the local Veta one. They are a great resource to ask in terms of what is great for the area. They've been planting trees in Veta for a long time. So that doesn't necessarily impact as much like what's available to the tree as much as your knowledge and what trees are available. But things that do impact the trees you can grow would be things like water restrictions that the town board may place, watershed protections that may exist. Veta doesn't have any as far as I'm aware, but Veta, their town board, especially with the urging of my agency, there's a lot of nudging towards further watershed protections because of potential risk to those concerns from wildfires. And then another thing impacting what trees can be grown in the community or the individuals within the community. Usually they won't have as much impact on that, but there can be particular maybe neighbors that don't like certain species, or my original thought was maybe somebody that had a better knowledge on like emerald ash borer and knowing that's a terrible tree to plant right now, and they'd be waving the flag saying don't do this one. So people, and I guess that refers to like arborists and people in my position with my agency as well. We can all be resources to help inform what the best tree is for the best spot. So when it comes to people, this is where it really is going to vary wildly and what the outcomes of the tree chosen will be. People have wildly different goals and objectives and what they would want from a tree. These are some of the services. It's not an exhaustive list. There's more than this that trees provide. But shade is a big one. People use trees for sure for laying in the summer, getting away from the sun, helping to drop energy costs on houses. If you have trees strategically placed around structures, you can absolutely impact energy costs. Trees can be used obviously for fruits and things that we can eat. A lot around here, wind, snow, or erosion protection is a great thing for uses of trees. And you don't have to go any further than just Highway 12, that curve coming down the hill there. It's a great example of how wind protection or wind and snow can be protected from impacting roads with strategic placement of trees. On a similar note, you can also use those kind of windbreaks for privacy to block your house from roads so your neighbors aren't peeping in the windows. Aesthetics, most people, whether they know it or not, have an impact on their psyche from being around trees. A lot of times it's even, if you're having a real frustrating moment, it's like go take a walk down the street with a bunch of trees and odds are you'll feel better. So the aesthetics of trees cannot be undermined. The scents we get from them, the flowers, I know probably everyone in here loves like lilacs in the spring. So it's really pleasing to almost all the senses to have trees around. There's a bunch of reasons that we want them. Furthermore, the wildlife, pollinators, things that we rely on, that goes back to fruit and foods. But the pollinators that we rely on for honey, or the wildlife that we rely on for food, or for the aesthetics, all rely on trees. And of course, oxygen, the photosynthesis process of converting our CO2 back into usable oxygen. Huge service that we all need to, no one's going to deny wanting. Then the next thing when it comes to personal variables would be the growth of the trees. What fits your purposes? So if you're looking for the shade trees, this is where you'll have individual trees, kind of like this picture up in the right here. There'll be a lot of times significant spacing between them. You aren't going to have them intermingling with the crowns. They'll be where you need them for that shade purpose. And you can have a wider variety. You can almost kind of just pick the trees you want for each individual service. So maybe one for shade, and then 30 feet away you have one for fruit. And then, you can just differ things that way. Versus a windbreak, tends to be more grouped, the crowns are going to intermingle, they'll be more evenly spaced, and you'll have usually less variety because you almost want like a uniform appearance to a windbreak to be able to get that ecosystem service of the wind prevention and blocking. So really, it just depends on your ultimate goal and what you're trying to achieve with the trees. But with that said, one of the biggest considerations for this is biodiversity. A lot of the problems we have with urban forests are, 50, 70 years ago, ash trees were growing great, so they said, let's plant ash trees everywhere. Cut to today, where we have emerald ash borer, and they're killing streets at a time because we didn't plant trees to interrupt that continuity. It's easy for the emerald ash borer to just go from tree to tree because there's no interruption. So the more that we can have differing species, the better. So as we can do that, and even with the windbreaks, there are potentials to figure out what the growth patterns are, how far the spread is, how tall they grow. Finding the way to intermingle the crowns, but still have some diversity in there is going to be huge. The time of year, like I said, you want to be consistent with your growing season. So if you're in a higher elevation that has a smaller window, you want to be cognizant of that when you plant. But also the best times of year for planting are going to be spring and fall. Pretty much can't plant in winter, and summer can be a big challenge because of the survival aspect. You have to provide a lot of water, a lot of fertilizer, and then the wildlife are more active at that point too. So you might be fighting critters trying to eat the trees you plant. So time of year consideration is key. The type of seedling you're planting. The one here, this is maybe a foot tall and the diameter of a pencil. That's a true seedling, but there could be saplings. The picture that the Veta tree board was planting was a sapling, maybe 4 inches in diameter and taller than I am. So the type of tree you're planting and how big of a hole you need to dig, that's big considerations as well. And then the survival things, as I kind of mentioned, is real key. When people like the federal U.S. Forest Service go out and do plantings, they'll tend to be a numbers game. They'll go out and plant 13,000 seedlings with the expectation that maybe 3,000 will survive. Private landowners don't always have those economic resources to just buy way more than they need and assume most will die. So survival supplements like the fertilizer, root polymer is a powder that essentially absorbs a bunch of moisture and helps with keeping the roots watered during times of drought especially. Wildlife fencing to protect from those critters that I mentioned, and then supplemental irrigation during times of drought is key, but something that people tend to overlook is winter drought. There could be spurts of up to a month or more where we don't see any precipitation. It might be wise to go out and hit your trees with a little bit of water in that case. Even though it's winter, trees still need water. So now resources for you. First of all, this is the CSFS Buyer's Guide. Old version on the right, new version on the left. It should have been on all your chairs. But if you need to find it online, just type in CSFS Buyer's Guide. This is one of the most invaluable resources I've had, and I've probably given out more of these than any other publication from my agency. This has great information. When we look at the soil types that I mentioned earlier, and if you have soil issues, this lets you know that certain trees will do better in highly alkaline soils, or adapted to coarse and medium texture soils. So it has that information in here. It has the elevation information. It has the size. So if you are looking to do a windbreak or something, it tells you how far it'll spread and how tall it'll grow. Let's see, possible insect problems, lifespans, the ability to be hardiness to cold and drought. This is a great resource that will help you determine if the tree you want to plant is the right tree for the right place. Beyond this, my agency has all sorts of publications online. csfs.collegestate.edu, and then there's a tab that says publications. You can look through there, find a whole bunch of stuff. Or again, in Google, just type in CSFS windbreak if you have more questions on that. There's also just searching Colorado shade trees. I've found quite a bit of helpful information on there for planting trees for that purpose. Or if you have any other purpose, like what's a good fruit tree for Veta, Colorado. Sometimes just a simple search like that can help. It's called my agency here in Veta. My agency is an extension of Colorado State Colorado State University, Warner College. So all the extensions from CSU are partnership agencies with my agency. So they are also good resources, and there's a whole bunch of publications they have available. And then there's also plenty of other forestry resources in the community you can always bother. So really the long and short of it, or the too long didn't read of my presentation today, is the suitability of the species is highly dependent on the limiting factors of the resources available to it. So there's the water quantity, water type, whether light can get to it, whether nutrients are available in the soil, the quality of the soil, is there pollution in the soil, the type of growing season you're working with, the protection that you need from wildlife, the protection that you need from climate, and what you want to get out of the tree. You combine all these together and starts to, these kind of books start to push out like the things you can use, and you start to figure out what your options are, and then you can have your choice, like maybe narrow it down to 5 and pick your favorite 2 or 3. So this is kind of just a framework for helping you reduce 200 or 300 options down to 5. So. With that is pretty much, like I said, the bulk of my presentation wasn't too long, but I'm really hoping that you all have some good questions. So, yes?
In the last, say, 10 years, what trees have been eliminated from recommendations?
Well, that's a good question. Emerald ash borer, or because of emerald ash borer, ash trees specifically are a big one. Chestnut, those aren't really around anymore.
Birch, I don't see birch in here.
Yeah, birch isn't really a great one in Colorado to begin with. We have a bog birch that grows up in mountains and along streams, and it is kind of a riparian species, so it relies more on water. So you almost have to be next to a stream or something for that to grow well, or a lot of supplemental irrigation. So it's probably doable, but is it worth the extra resources, or can you get something that'll maybe do, because ash is in that family as well, and maybe some of the mountain ash trees might do well, so something you can still get.
Poplar no longer recommended?
Not that I'm aware of, that might be true, but as far as I know, they're still growing them at least in the northern Front Range. I just don't think they grow well here in Veta.
And poplar is one of the banned trees for the town of Veta. I'm Megan, I'm the chairman of the Park and Tree Board.
Oh, awesome.
Here in town. There are a few varieties that are under the town ordinances that are not allowed to be planted.
Yep, and with that,
poplar,
poplar, probably Russian
varieties
olive, even though Russian olive grows great, is probably not allowed. Siberian elm, that's another one. A lot of those are dying in town. It's considered an invasive, but in Veta, it never grew well enough to be invasive, so I think it kind of got the wink and nudge, it was okay. But they're mostly dying now. I don't think anyone wants to replace it with Siberian elm, even though they do well here.
That big one right here is a Siberian elm.
Yeah, so I mean, we have borers from that right now. That's what's affecting most of those, plus their age. They're all pretty old, I imagine, at least 50 to 100 years, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of study on mycelium and how trees talk to each other. So how do you encourage that in a street tree that is 30 or 50 feet apart? They can't talk to each other.
That's true. I don't know if there's really a way to do, like, encourage mycelial interactions in an urban setting as much. I think there is still benefits to mycelial mats and interactions within that tree itself and connecting its roots together, but yeah, but I think I maybe even saw the same documentary you might have seen that about how they actually communicate through that. And yeah, it'd be great if, I mean, that's part of the problem with like the asphalt and the concrete of that. We're creating little islands of trees and they can't, it's nice because they aren't competing for resources that way. If their roots are touching, they're usually competing for resources, but at the same time, you lose the benefits of things like that where they can really benefit from the interaction with mycelium. But worth looking into. I mean, maybe working with the tree board and saying, hey, if you plant in the future, make sure you plant in little groups or something so they can, I don't know if that's really worth it in an urban setting. And urban versus like a natural forest, it's real hard to find that fine line of what's going to work best and what's allowed.
What if you inoculate it when you plant the tree?
You could definitely do that, and I think that's almost common practice for a lot of seedlings at this point, is just having them inoculated for the greenhouse conditions. I think it's beneficial. Whether or not that continues that inoculation after they've been planted in native soil, I don't know. But
what do you mean inoculate? What is inoculate?
it's with the mycelium, the fungal. So they essentially like put spores on there that grow into the mycelial mats. So.
Helps get the tree a boost then?
Yeah, and that then the way they can communicate with each other, it's almost like one tree knows through the mycelium that another tree needs access to water, so it'll reduce its water uptake so the other tree can compensate. Yeah, it's this whole world of fungi that is way beyond me. I'm here to talk about trees.
There's a lot of good videos of it.
Yeah, the mycelium and fungi are crazy. The more we can have them interacting with our trees, the better, that's for sure. So.
Does CSU still offer trees for sale that are,
Very good question. So my agency, like I said, we're an extension of CSU, so we did have the nursery, my agency had the nursery. We still have it, it's currently being revamped, and the state legislature, I think, diverted about $10 million to them to revamp it. It'll be a couple years before they've caught up. So we had a little bit of a hiccup with COVID. We kept trying to produce seedlings during that time. All of our nursery staff, we had a skeleton crew up there, so we only had like 5 people running it, had to reduce our operations. Then that ended up in a few years where we didn't have any seedlings at all. Then we had, I think last 2 years, we had some limited, but then we got the money to revamp, so now we're back offline.
so is it based out of Fort Collins, the nursery?
Yep. But we do have some partners. There's one out of Loveland, One Canopy. They're a private entity, but they've helped fill in the gap. They sell the same kind of seedlings we do, and they sell it for competitive conservation costs. That's kind of the challenge.
It's called One Canopy?
Yeah, One
And
Canopy.
where is that?
Loveland.
Loveland.
They're based out of Loveland, yeah. And then there's plenty of other seedling nurseries around, but a lot of them tend to be the non-conservation, like the bigger ones that,
Yeah.
you know, they're good quality, but you spend more and you can't really plant as many of them at a time if you don't have the resources. So conservation ones you can buy 500 at a time for the price you can buy 20 of the other ones. So.
Right.
Yes.
Sure. I know some of these are no longer available. Is that due to the staffing issues? You couldn't take care of them, or you just don't want to use them?
Both. So sometimes they just cycle out things that weren't as popular. Sometimes they're, you know, I think this specific publication might be from 2014. So, you know, maybe they found out that, like I said, maybe Siberian elm might have been in here, or like Lombardy poplar, maybe because tree boards are, you know, not using that as often. My agency might have phased those out, kind of thing.
2008.
Oh, even older, yeah, so 2008. Yeah, still, a lot of this information doesn't change, but it can be dated in instances like that where just things we don't carry anymore, but these were all at least something that have been confirmed to grow well in Colorado at one point.
Maybe I missed it, but if we want to get some of these, do we work through you, or?
In the future, yes, for the next couple of years, so while our nursery is being revamped, really like One Canopy or some of the other, I'd have to look up names for them, but I'm sure just Colorado nurseries would lead to a few of the private entities that do it. But my agency will be back in this game in a few years. But for right now, yeah, we're referring everyone to private companies.
Okay, great, thanks.
But yeah, you can still use this as a resource for what you can be looking for from private companies and what work well. Just,
One tree I don't see and I'm very interested in possibly planting when this coming spring. It's a big tooth maple,
okay.
Rocky Mountain maple, and it grows in the Front Range apparently. And how would that, I don't see it in here, I'm just curious. And I have a pretty wet area. I'm starting a small orchard. And it's basically river bottom land.
Yeah, so,
I didn't notice it in here.
It grows in dry canyons too.
I don't think
And like
it's in
some-
yeah, I don't think it is
I'm
either.
It grows in dry canyons and alkaline soil, and we've been trying to get it here too.
Yeah, and it will do good here in Veta and Colorado. Obviously, you said it grows here naturally. At least the Rocky Mountain does for sure. I wasn't positive that the big tooth was the same as the Rocky Mountain. I thought they were different species.
They're
but-
different.
Okay.
Are they different?
Yeah, so Rocky Mountain does grow great here. The trick is though is that it grows better as a shrub. It's kind of hard to get it to grow as a tree unless it's in an urban setting. You'll have better luck. So the ones that grow up in the forests, the mountains from here, they're all going to be shrubby, 25 stems that are an inch big. If you grow it in town and kind of clip those shrubs, train it into a tree, you can get some success. But maples are usually more water. I don't want to say dependent. Like they use more water than like most
I have
conifers.
a corner of Cherry and Cascade. There's usually 50% of the time there's a pretty good pond there.
Okay. Yeah.
So, when it rains, it pours down Cherry Street and it settles there, and that's the corner of my property.
Yeah, it's certainly worth trying. It will require probably some more supplemental irrigation than like a conifer would.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, they're great trees, I got about 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. the big warning is that it'll probably try to start life as a shrub. You'll have to convince it to be a tree.
They're multi-trunk, and I hate to see them trying to prune them to a single trunk when it's natural for them to grow in a multi-trunk, like, what are the Canada red choke cherries, they do that a lot too. They want to sucker and
Yeah.
they prune them and manipulate them into being a single tree. You can do it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it can be done, but yeah, it just requires a little bit more.
Well, the way I'm
help with
familiar with, I lived, before moving here, 6 years ago, I spent 28 years in New Mexico. In the Manzano Mountains east of Albuquerque, there's a place called 4th of July Canyon, and it's filled with Rocky Mountain maples. And in the fall, everybody goes there to see all these bright red. And so I'm just, that's up in the mountains in the canyon, and this place, where I'm thinking of planting this is kind of, river bottom, wet area.
Yeah, I think you should.
And I would like a tree and not a shrub,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think you'll have success if you try it. It's just, like I
Yeah.
said, will probably take a little bit extra love than a comfort. But the comfort is, especially like if you were to plant a juniper, it's almost just set it and forget it. You never have to look at it again after those first couple of years. But yeah, if you do a maple, especially those times of drought, the real cold winters, when we have those temperature swings, those kind of trees do tend to take the impact a little bit more. So that's one consideration I'd say, is just be more ready to give it some extra water in drought times and things like that.
Jared?
Okay, good.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
All yours.
Go for it.
Take it outside.
Trees have feeder roots and everything, right? So how do trees survive in this sidewalk? Everybody asks that. How do they get their water? How do they get their feeder roots?
Jeff Goldblum, Jurassic Park, life finds a way. It's when I'm out in the woods, I'll be hiking, there'll be a giant boulder and a tree growing right on the top of it. I can't explain how it happens sometimes. Trees are hardy, they're smart. Yeah, I don't know how to explain how they do it, but it's always the ones you don't want. Like, you're trying to grow a tree right here and it won't grow, but then there's the one coming up through the sidewalk that won't go away. Yeah, I don't know, trees, I don't know the mechanism for it, but they can be resilient.
I wanted to go back to the beginning. You briefly touched on soil composition and how that affects water retention, and you also mentioned fungal viability, right? I'm just curious, what's the main mechanism there? Is it just porousness? So you often hear volcanic soil is great for growing all sorts of things. Is that because it's so porous?
Yeah.
Holds water, allows for cells for mycological activity to proliferate? And then is that the case that granite, as you mentioned, is less porous, and is that why it's less good at retaining water?
Yeah, so there's a couple things in action there. One of them I can't explain because it involves a little bit of physics and chemistry, but it's called cation exchange capacity of soil, and it's essentially how good, it's the interaction of water and almost like, I think, a static electrical charge that builds up and how it can grab free-floating things in the water and pull it from there.
Okay.
The intricacies of that I don't fully understand, but it's like a chemistry physics reaction there. The other is what you touched on, the porousness, and if I remember right, sand molecules are bigger, so you'd think that they have a larger surface area, but clay has more pores, and the pore, it's like a golf ball. Like a completely smooth golf ball has, X surface area, but if you put all those dimples in it, that surface area jumps up dramatically. So it's the same thing with clay. It has those pores in it that really trap water better. And so it's harder, that's why clay drains slower. And the slower draining soils, the longer the water's there, the more time you have for rot and fungal activity to occur.
Right.
So it's those two things working together that really impacts the soil quality. But then the parent material itself, whatever nutrients were available from high up before it ever started eroding, there just might not have been certain things there if it came from granite. I can't remember what parent material has the most nutrients in it, but I know that granite and sandstone tend to not be as nutrient heavy as some of the other parent materials. So.
And give me something to research regarding this cation process.
Yeah, and our soil quality throughout pretty much all of Colorado is very, there's a reason that once you hit Kansas, things start growing great. Yeah, but here, we struggle.
I'm from an area of red clay in the southeast of the country, so.
Yeah.
I know the difference, but I was curious what those metrics were, or those actions, but
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. There's probably some other stuff at play too, but those are at least the two I know the best, so.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
As a landowner, where can I go to get information on my soils?
It's a landowner. Well, there is a agency that specializes in soil. They were created after the Dust Bowl because that was a soil issue. They're called the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and we have a local resource for them in Walsenburg. A gentleman named Sammy Molinaro. He's a delight to work with if you haven't met him before. So that's always a good first start because they're soil specialists. Folks like myself and maybe some federal resources might have some soil knowledge too, but yeah, I always suggest starting with the experts, and that's the NRCS. And then CSU Extension does have some soil stuff too as well.
Currently, what are the primary bug problems and disease problems for forests locally?
Okay, so in the mountainous forests, the ones that not a lot of people are living in, we have the spruce budworm, a Barren Blue Lake area. That was a big cause of what killed so many trees up there. Subsequent wind events helped knock a lot of them down, so it wasn't just the insects, but the weather that helped finish them off, so that could be an issue with them sometimes too. Kind of up in a similar area, Kachara, there was some kind of touch and go aspen issues that it was various and endemic. There's like an aspen leaf roller and something called like a tortrix, I think was what its name was. They're endemic. People were calling us because they were seeing some impact, but next year all the aspens looked heavy. All the aspens looked healthy. Everyone had forgot that there was any issues the year before. So a lot of the issues we see are endemic, but moving down closer to us, over Navajo, Majors Ranch, and even into Levita and surrounding areas from here. Pinyon nips have been a big thing. That when you're driving on 160 to Walsenburg, and there's that stretch on the north there. There's just kind of a bunch of dead pinyon. That's the pinyon nips that did that. That one was kind of rising for the last few years, but I think, especially with how much precipitation we've got these last couple of years, the more precipitation we get, the better the trees' defenses are against insects. So because we've had such good precipitation, we haven't seen as much impact the last couple of years. Still have seen some though. And then when you get more into our urban setting where we are here in Levita, like I said, the Siberian elms have been seeing a lot of impact from borers there, and then they have the elm beetles there coming and eating all the leaves afterwards. What else is really going on in Levita proper? I get, a lot of times what I'll get calls for is somebody will say my conifer is dying, and I'll go there and I'm like, well, it's 6 feet from the street. Odds are it's, the roots are impacted from the sidewalk next to it, or some salt got pushed off from the sidewalk or the road, and that did something. Herbicide damage can sometimes happen too. Maybe somebody sprayed for some weeds around a tree and didn't look too close to the label and accidentally killed their tree. So that's, I honestly get more calls for that in the towns, the stuff that's preventable or human caused than insects. But yeah, once you get outside of the towns, that's when it becomes the budworms and the nips. And then the types of damage they do are also very different. The budworm is a defoliator, so it takes multiple years of coming back and eating the needles to kill the tree, whereas the Ips beetle is a bark beetle, so it goes in between the bark and the wood, severs the vascular system of the tree, so the water and nutrients can't be carried up, and that acts much quicker. It's usually death within like a month. So if you see a pinyon tree that goes from perfect green to kind of olive to rustic orange within a month, it's usually pinyon nips. That's the one that I've dealt with the most around here the last couple of years for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of willow aphids, any ideas?
Yeah, there's a lot of those too. With pretty much any insect, there are preventative or treatment sprays available. What ends up being the prohibiting factor is the cost. So, if somebody has 40 acres up by Kuchara, they can't go spray every single tree. They just have to pick the ones they have the most value for and target that way. If you're in town, you might have a little bit better luck. If you're on like an acre, you might be able to spray every tree. Yeah, and then street trees too, depending on whatever the municipal resources are. I don't think the town board of Levita is necessarily funded very heavily, but I think if there was potentially an issue that was gonna affect all of our trees, maybe some resources might be diverted that way, but.
Have you seen emerald ash borer then here locally?
No, I haven't seen any in Levita yet, but Boulder, and then somewhere south of Boulder. Because Boulder was, I think, 2021 was the furthest south it made it. But I think last year it might have been found a little bit further south of even there. I'd have to look. But still it definitely hasn't made it past Springs yet.
Great.
But it can, it's only a matter of time.
I gather then if they're isolated, your trees are isolated and you're 20 miles from another one, as long as you're not bringing them in firewood or, and I guess that's another question. If you're getting wood chips too, I guess that's always a concern. What kind of insect you may be bringing in, bringing in for mulch and that.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily, most of the wood chips and wood products we use around here are Colorado-based, so we're just pushing Colorado insects around to different places and don't have to worry about introducing them to new places. But yes, if a urban setting does some ash treatment, they definitely have to be very careful about how they transport that wood. Because chipping it, I mean, so depending on the insect, sometimes, it has to be 1/8" chips or smaller to really kill them. Can't always rely on the chipping to kill them.
Has anything ever affected cottonwood?
Yeah, there's same things that affect aspen. They're in the same family, so they have a lot of the same insects. But again, it's endemic stuff, stuff that exists naturally and is helpful to help. When they're growing too dense, it's nature's way of saying, hey, this tree needs better resources. Let's kill some neighbors so we can have them. So there's definitely things that are impacting the cottonwoods and the poplars in town, but nothing that's notable really. Yes.
And on the wood chips topic, there is the town, when we chip branches and stuff that we have removed from trees or large pieces of trees, there is a chip pile, where am I? Down by the railroad tracks, right before, there's the Colorado State for your office, then there's the one that has the cars in it, and the chain link fence right on the other, between the railroad and the chain link fence there's a pile of chips, and those were all local trees chipped up. And those are free to anybody in town that would like them. So if you do need chips, that is a free local source where you can go and just pick those up. You don't have to ask anybody permission, you just pull up there, take what you need.
And then a lot of the branches and stuff that are cut off, it's nice that those all get hauled up to the town lakes and burned, so we don't have to worry about spreading insects that way.
Yeah, if it looks like it was sick or diseased at all, we take it into the burn pile if it, and what else? There was something else I was saying. I don't remember what the second. Oh, and the other way that we've seen lots of the disease getting transferred is from tools. So if you have somebody come in, that's one thing we're real picky on when we do have outside companies come in and do tree work, like the tree out front here, some of the other ones on Main Street. We always make sure that they sanitize and sterilize other tools before working on any of our trees, because if they trim some in another area and different diseases can get on them and then they cut our trees with them, it could transfer. So
yeah, it's a really good point. And on the same note of the mycelial mats that would be beneficial, you can accidentally transfer unbeneficial microbes and bacteria and fungus as well.
Is the list of the town's disallowed trees on the website?
yes, so if you go to the Town of Levita website, I was just looking it up so I would know exactly how to get there, and then you go to their menu on top, you go down to the municipal codes, and you'll see a little search, and if you just enter tree in there, the word tree, and hit search, it comes up. It has the species that they say you can have. It has ones that that are prohibited, areas it's prohibited. I know that within a certain feet of stop signs, sidewalks, driveways, fire hydrants, things like that, there are different spacing requirements, as well as on right-of-way streets and not right-of-way streets, where the utilities run through your property. And it says no tree topping. It says depending on the spread of the tree, if it crosses over into town property, that we have a right to trim it if needed. and to remove the stumps as much as possible. But those can all be found if you just search the word tree under the municipal codes.
Of all those different categories, are the ones that are not allowed, just as a general principle, is that because they're invasive or?
Yeah, for the most part, it was, where did I just see that?
They're suckers.
It's most, and yeah, lots of them spread or they droop down. Any of the weeping species we frown upon.
I know some municipal town boards will prohibit trees based on like their seeds, too, if they do like a mess with the seeds.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of times it's usually the invasive aspect, but if it's, a nuisance and it causes a mess,
That makes sense.
yeah. I think there's one tree that, I don't think it's a Colorado one, but it had a lot of like drippy sap from it that's banned in like a lot of the eastern towns, even though it does mold.
One more question, how about mitigation? What's going on with mitigation now
Okay, are you talking like the town of Veta specific or just in the area?
in the area?
Okay, lots of stuff. We have something in every, like we have our hands in almost every pot around right now. So we're helping the feds with a lot of work they've been doing up at Bear and Blue Lake in that area, Panadero, the Trinchera Road. That's all being done through my agency, through what's called the Good Neighbor Authority. The federal government doesn't always have all the capacity they need to do all their work, so they're kind of tag teaming with my agency to get it done. So a lot of the work that's been done on federal land, even though I said I'm a private land guy, has actually been my agency. We also have a state grant that is $7.2 million every year, and a lot of that money's been coming into my field office. I've been working with the local nonprofit, the Smash Peaks Alliance for Wildfire Protection, or SPOP, is they shorten their name to. And I think we have about 1,000, maybe 1,200 acres of work either planned or in progress in the Cuchara Valley, and including places like Navajo as well. So SPOP is starting to be a little bit more of a regional player. They kind of started in the Cuchara Valley, but
And who heads up SPOT?
let's see, their president is a gentleman named Craig Yenzer, and their board is various, I think they're all Cuchara folks. They were formed in response to the Spring Creek fire, though. One of their founders was in Forbes Creek on the other side of the mountains there, lost her house, so very, very keen on making sure we were prepared for the future. So with the state grant, we've been working on a lot of, anywhere from 5 or 10 acre properties up to 110 acre properties, treating the 110 acre property we treated entirely. So we've been able to do a lot of good work there. Again, it's private land with that one. But it was complementing work that I've done not only with the GNA stuff, but we had a federal funding grant through my agency where we've been working along Highway 12. So if you've seen any treatment on either side of Highway 12 for 150 feet on either side, that's been stuff we've been involved with as well.
Is that up at Cordova Pass? Did you do that?
Everything from Cordova Pass on this way, there was quite a bit of federal land in there as well, though, that the Fuels Management Officer Dennis Page and his crew oversaw a lot of that. So we, again, have been a lot of partnerships too. So my agency's doing the private land stuff, and then the feds are helping to complement and expand. We'll do some private land, and then they'll do the public land surrounding that private land. Let's see. We have, like I said, just a lot of grant funding stuff that's going right now.
Any youth corps? Are there any youth corps people doing any of this mitigation?
Yeah, SPOP especially, they've been bringing in Mile High Youth Corps to work with them. And they also have been trying to get on the schedule with a veterans group, Team Rubicon. The challenge with them is they're also a disaster response group, so when hurricanes or probably the LA fires, it's probably hard to get on their schedule right now. I bet they're doing stuff there. But whenever they have free time, Team Rubicon loves to come to the Rocky Mountain West and help us with mitigation, because it gives them some critical chainsaw training that isn't quite as intense as the emergency response stuff. So. Yeah, but yeah, we have a lot of mitigation going on, so, and even more every day.
Is there any sycamore growing around here?
Not that I've seen, but I know they do well in northern Fleming.
Pueblo, between Pueblo,
Yeah.
Trinidad.
Yeah.
I've tried them and I have real good luck.
I think it might be an elevation thing with Veta. Yeah, once you get, maybe Walsenburg might have luck, but
Yeah.
if
I don't
Pueblo,
see
Trinidad.
any in Walsenburg, but I don't know if it's cold or what it is, but boy, I just haven't had real good luck.
Yeah, I really like sycamores. I wish they were more around, but I haven't seen one successfully happening in Levita.
There's some huge ones above.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one more. I've noticed a lot of people piling snow up along the tree trunks. How bad is that?
It can be a mixed blessing. You're definitely making sure that you're getting a little bit more water to your tree, which is good. But then you have that slow, like the water being there for a long time, could cause fungal problems. Really during the winter, the likelihood of it growing and proliferating is pretty low though. So I think, especially in Colorado where we sometimes have water issues, the more you can do to capture the water is probably gonna be better.
I mean,
But
up into the trunk, that doesn't hurt the bark.
no, it probably won't. Like I said, you might cause some fungal issues. There is actually a fungus that has the creative name of bear white for obvious reasons. It tends to, when it grows on trees like that, does lead, but it ends up also not being harmful to the tree. It's unsightly. So people don't like the appearance of it and they worry about it, but long term, yeah. If you were to somehow have snow all winter and leave it buried for 6 months, that would be a problem. But if it's you put it up and a week later it's all melted, I don't think it'll lead to long-term issues. And all this is with the caveat that I'm not an arborist. I understand trees as like a sociological construct and less than a psychological individual construct. Any other questions? Yes.
What would you say are some of your most successful trees? I guess obviously your junipers and pinions do well here. What else? Choke cherries.
Yep, those do great.
New Mexico locust.
Yeah, New Mexico locust, exactly. And the oak, as much, I do have to comment on the oak, because everyone loves to hate on the oak around here. It's terrible for fire behavior. It grows like a weed, you mow it down, it comes right back up. The nice thing about it is if you let it grow and get those nice mature ones, you can really start to crowd out some of those babies and get almost like a southern feel of oak.
Oh, right, got some beautiful.
Yeah, the long
Not that big, for example. Oh,
yeah,
crazy.
and you can do the same with the locust, so that it does have, the oak is in the right place. How you grow it and make it work for you, that can require a little bit of finesse, but other than that, what you noted with the junipers and the pinion, they're great because of their drought resistance. That's why I always encourage them around here. Similar note, if somebody wants something on their property, it's not the pinion or the juniper, I say ponderosa pine. Of the remaining pines that grow well around here, it's the next most drought hardy. So I definitely recommend that one. It also has the smell of like the orange creamsicle when they get big enough. So yeah, ponderosa pine is one of my favorite trees and they do great. Douglas fir on occasion can grow well on those same kind of sites, but when a drought hits, it's going to be the first one that declines. Also terrible for fire mitigation with those low-growing branches. So if you have a big property, you probably don't want a lot of Douglas fir. But it's nice if you just have, a place in town and just an individual they grow nice. It's always nice to have the state tree growing if you can. It's a pretty tree, I like that one, but it can be a little more fickle and require more water too. It definitely does better on those south-facing slopes naturally, so, north-facing slopes, where it keeps that water, yeah. In town though, like hackberries have done great in town. Hackberry, the other one is
Elderberry?
Elderberry does good. I always get confused with hackberry. I can't remember what's honey locust. Not just the New Mexico locust. The honey locust is greater up there too. So all those I think don't require that extra irrigation that like a maple might, unless it's a bad drought. Any deciduous tree could require some extra love, but not near as bad as a maple. So.
The
Talk
honey,
about New Mexico locust, New Mexico privet does really good.
Oh yeah.
And the deer leaf, those are one too. No, they're really fun.
Well, and then shrubs like dogwood do great around here. There's another shrub I had in mind too.
Serviceberry.
Mountain mahogany does really good in this area. And it's a beautiful growing shrub too. It'd work great for privacy or snow fence, something like that. Really like that one. I think he's on the first.
Is the Austrian pine close to ponderosa pine?
Yeah, it's more of an ornamental tree because it doesn't grow as unruly. And it tends to have more of like a globular appearance. So it is a really common urban tree because it's prettier for most people in the ponderosa and more manageable. Ponderosas will grow really tall. I think Austrian's maybe like 50 feet. Let's see, it should be in here. But the Austrian and Scotch are both really common for urban settings because they grow more favorably, or their growth form is more favorable. Austrian. is 18. So in terms of how tall it says it'll grow, yep, that's about right, 40 feet high. So that's a lot of time, like I said, in urban settings, you don't want a tree that's gonna grow 80 feet tall. You have worries about it breaking and falling on a house or high winds. So Austrian pine, it's a nice middle of the road. It's not gonna grow too unwieldy, still be manageable. So.
Jared, two things. We have a lot of property here in town, had some really great aspen trees kind of out in the green belt between the road and the property. And love the aspen trees, but I want to warn people, they send out these these roots where they cut back in your garden. Pretty soon your garden is an aspen forest, unless you're out there snipping all the time. So just something to share with people. Don't put a garden anywhere in aspen tree.
Yeah, so the ways of managing that, you're right, are constantly snipping them, that'll help. And then they actually do make a chemical that can help with it as well. I know people aren't always excited to use chemicals though, so. I think it's copper sulfate if I remember right, which is what you use for both drain opening and I think some aquariums, which is weird, but yeah, you just drill like a hole in the sucker and put these little blue crystals in it and it stops it from
Oh,
growing.
that might be work, but it's in a food garden, but anyway. About 30 years ago, I met a gentleman who came to my place asking if I knew anything about a locust tree that was similar to the New Mexican locust called the Werfenum locust. But I've never found anybody who knows it. If there is, I don't know how to tell the difference. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I have not. Yeah, my guess is that they probably confused it with the New Mexico locust
Yeah.
and lumped them together or something.
Yeah, the New Mexican locusts just live here, so we call them Werfenum.
Yeah, exactly. Or it could be a sub-variety, maybe some real deep botanists, some point in the future, decide to call it a sub-variety, and those don't always make it up to like the literature that I see all the time. Like I very rarely know the sub, like I can get down to the genus and the species. If there's a subspecies, I very rarely know it.
I will note that New Mexican locust, the flowers are edible and they're incredibly tasteful. Really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah, I like the locust for a lot of reasons, except for when I have to walk through
I know.
big groups of them.
They are native though, too, aren't they?
Yep, they are. They're also nitrogen fixers, which is very valuable. So yeah, they take nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into usable nitrogen for plants in the soil, which is a pretty tough process otherwise in the natural world. I think the only other way it happens is like the air around the lightning strike becomes that same, if I heard right in the past. But either way, finding usable nitrogen is always a big challenge for plants, so gotta appreciate when a New Mexico locust does it for you.
What about box elder?
They're good trees. They don't do, as far as I know, they're not nitrogen fixers.
Right.
It's usually mostly legumes.
Sure.
And I don't think New Mexico locust is a legume, but it still does the fixing, the nitrogen fixing. So. But any like those bean plants, they're always nitrogen fixers.
Do you see box elders around here then?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep. Property I live on has some. We have some in my office, and they're so despite the name, they are actually in the maple family as well. So they grow really well if you want a maple that does great in this area. Yeah, they have a lot of bugs, that's for sure. Yeah.
And on the box elder, that is another one that is prohibited within the town, except for with, well, the bugs are awful. However, there is a new species of it. We actually planted one last year where we took down the big, large, was it cottonwood or tree at Popular and East Virginia. There was that big dead tree there forever. That little tree that we planted right next to where we took down the other one, that one is a sensation box elder or maple, and those have been resistant to the bugs. So far in all of everything that they've done, they have not, none of them have produced box elder bugs, which is an excellent benefit. So that might be something to take into consideration. But most of the varieties of box elders, if you call it a sensation box elder, then it's prohibited in town. If you call it a sensation maple, it's not prohibited in town. So that's what I found so far. So.
And where did you find that sensation maple?
We purchased our trees last year through Brady's nursery out of Canyon City. They have in Pueblo, they have their greenhouse and nursery. I know also I believe it's too late for this year. They just closed their thing, but through the Colorado Tree Coalition, if you go to their website, there's a find the right tree thing under the menu, and it'll show all different kinds of trees, what are good and what area. It's kind of like this, but it has a whole bunch. And it also has links to the Arbor Day Foundation where you can purchase trees as well.
Yeah, good call. I forgot to put that on my slides. CTC is a really good resource. Colorado Tree Coalition for sure. And then Arbor Day Foundation. That's who, when the Park and Tree Board picture, they're holding that 35-year sign. That was the Arbor Day Foundation sign. I'm sure you see it as you drive into town. Veta's been participating in Arbor Day stuff for 38, 39 years
I
now.
think this is our 39th year we just turned in our application for this year's Tree City USA. And all of the 14 trees we planted here in town last year were possible from a grant that we applied for through the Colorado Tree Coalition. We received, so I think the project had a really big cost, but we got $1,500 from the Colorado Tree Coalition that we matched with $1,500 of our money from the town to purchase the 14 trees we planted throughout town last year.
Very good.
Any other questions?
What's a good way to contact you?
Good question. My contact information, you cannot read that email, I realize now. But my phone number is very legible. My name is Jared, Jared. Last name is Fleming, Fleming. If you put a period in between those two, with no space, and then at COLOSTATE, so colostate.edu. Very easy to say. That's my email address. If you just type in CSFS Veta into Google, you can click on there and it'll bring up my office's information. It'll have my email on there as well. I have my business card as many places as I can around town, so if you're in Charlie's or somewhere that has business cards, you can always look there and see if they haven't taken it down yet. And then my office is located on the intersection of Poplar and Moore. We almost always have the gate closed, but you can give us a call with that number and set up an appointment. If it's closed or if it does happen to be open, feel free to drop in. Otherwise, I'm pretty visible around town. I hang out at a lot of things. I'm always at Oktoberfest and doing the events like the music bingo, so you can always find me at that kind of place too. And track me down, ask me tree questions if you have them.
You still work with Gary?
Yes, I am. Yep. And then the new forester, Ashley, that's been with us and been a breath of fresh air. So, yeah. Any last minute questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.